All episodes of Season 1 of Marvel's new animated show, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, are officially out. And I just finished it today, and it was great, but this isn't my review for that show. I want to talk about one of my biggest takeaways from it, and that is how amazing Colman Domingo's Norman Osborn is, and we need him in the MCU right now. I was really excited back when they announced that Colman Domingo would be voicing Norman Osborn in Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man because he's a great actor. He knows what he's doing. But I also thought it was a little bit odd because this seems a little bit below his pay grade, right? And so that got me thinking, is there a possibility that he's not just playing him for this show? Like, could there actually be more to this, that they are planning on actually having him reprise his role for the mainline MCU? Because there really is something to that, because this show is like very MCU adjacent. We know this show was originally planned to be in the MCU, that it follows Tom Holland's Peter Parker before the events of Captain America Civil War, where he meets Tony Stark and things like that. And I don't blame them for switching it up. I get it. Like, you don't want to box yourselves in narratively, so they changed it to where it's more of a branch timeline or an alternate universe, whatever the terminology you want to use. And in the show, it's almost like a huge episode of What If. It's what if Norman Osborn became Spider-Man's mentor and not Tony Stark. And it plays out very interesting. Obviously, there's way more to the show than just that, but the reason I view it as almost like an episode of What If is because there's so many MCU adjacent events happening. There's the Sokovia Accords, there's Captain America, there's Iron Man, there's the events of Civil War, there's Doctor Strange. This Peter Parker is very similar to Tom Holland's portrayal of Peter Parker. The voice actor is the same one they got from What If, and that portrayal is supposed to be Tom Holland's Peter Parker, essentially. And so there's a lot of things that like are MCU infused that makes me think that it's almost like the testing ground to see, could Norman Osborn fit into the MCU world? How would they do it? And if Colman Domingo would be a good choice. And this is really a consequence-free option, because if it doesn't hit, no worries. You didn't commit to making him MCU Norman Osborn. If it does, it's easily integrated into it. And so this is my theory. This is my pitch for how I think Colman Domingo's Norman Osborn could actually fit into the MCU. So in order for him to fit into the MCU, there's obviously a few hurdles we got to jump over to make that make sense for different reasons. There's obviously the scene in No Way Home where Norman Osborn stops at Feast and he says this:
I didn't know where else to go. Someone's living in my house. Oscorp doesn't exist. My son.
And so we know there is no Oscorp or anything like that, and that there is no well-known Norman Osborn or Harry Osborn. They're not popular, they're not famous at the time that No Way Home takes place. And so we got to acknowledge that. We got to get through that. And I actually think because of that, because of the events of No Way Home, it actually enhances the story rather than make it feel like you got to come up with some loophole plot thing. Like, I actually think with this theory that I got going on, it makes for a really cool story. All right, so here's my pitch. Essentially, Norman Osborn was a scientist at Stark Industries. And I know that's like, bro, we've seen that 50 million times. It doesn't have to be Stark Industries. It could also be Hammer. It could also be another one. It doesn't have to be Stark, but I just feel like Stark Industries makes sense. And he's not disgruntled. He's not an angry employee like every Spider-Man villain was in the MCU, but he was a scientist at Stark Industries or Hammer, and he saw the absence of Tony Stark as an opportunity. When Tony Stark died, Stark Industries, in terms of their reputation and things like that and their advancements, began to decline. And so Norman Osborn saw an opportunity to fill in that space that Tony Stark once filled. And so he decides to create his own company post No Way Home called Oscorp. Now, it won't be as big, it won't be as major as we know it in other iterations where it's on par with Stark Industries. I would say it's more of a not as small as a startup, but it's not this huge corporation quite yet. They're somewhere in the middle, and I don't think this contradicts anything in No Way Home because it's a company. You can start a company at any time. And so when Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin came in, he came into the MCU, he realized there was no Oscorp. And then later after that, the Norman Osborn of this world, which I would love to be played by Colman Domingo, very similar to what we see in Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, he starts Oscorp after the events of No Way Home. The reason I said it's not quite a startup yet is because Oscorp begins to make some advancements, begins to gain some notoriety and attention, and Peter Parker begins to notice this, and he becomes afraid because he knows what Norman Osborn is going to become. Like, he knows from his fight with Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin and the damage and just personal loss he felt because of him, he can't let that happen again. And so he decides he needs to keep a close eye on this Norman Osborn. So we see Peter get a job at Oscorp so that he's able to work as closely to Norman Osborn as he can so he can keep an eye on him. The whole movie, we see him begin to develop a relationship with Norman Osborn, all with the motive of making sure he doesn't turn evil or seeing if that's going to happen at all. And maybe he can even develop a genuine mentorship relationship with him, and he's conflicted about, like, oh man, he's going to become this one day, but I really enjoy my relationship with him. He's a nice guy. He's helped me a ton. He's given me opportunities. Meanwhile, in the background, the whole time in the movie, we actually see that Harry Osborn is becoming the Green Goblin, and Peter is so fixated on making sure Norman doesn't become Green Goblin that Harry is actually going through this process the whole movie. I think it would be cool if Harry's Green Goblin suit looked like it does in the newer Ultimate Spider-Man comics. I think that suit design is sleek. I think it's awesome, and it makes sense. That design really fits in the MCU since this suit is based off Stark technology and things like that. And so I think it'd be cool. I think it'd be a really great twist and incorporating some lore from the comics, but putting a creative MCU modern twist on it, right? Because we know that there's times where Harry actually does become Green Goblin in the comics. And so I think it'd be cool to adapt that in a way that serves the story of Peter learning that everyone makes their choices. It's not determined by what a multiverse variant does or says, and that he should give people the benefit of the doubt. It shows him how he can trust again. And I just think it would be a cool twist because the audience would be expecting the entire time, waiting for that Norman Osborn twist, waiting for him to turn into Green Goblin, and he's actually just a good guy the whole time. I think that'd be fun. I think that'd be a great way to incorporate Colman Domingo's Norman Osborn into the MCU. So let me know what you think. Does this work? Does it not work? Are you a fan of this? Is there any holes that you can poke in this that, hey, this would contradict what the MCU's already got going? Let me know in the comments. Deuskies, homies.